Greater than 11% of all people throughout the United States of America over the age of 25 don't have a high school diploma. That's more than 29 million adults. One of the reasons why there are so many adults without high school diplomas is because throughout our nation, 7,000 students drop out of school every day. Now, it should come as no surprise to anyone that in those areas throughout our country where the graduation rate is low, the unemployment rate is high, and the rate of incarceration is even higher. But the most troubling fact related to these statistics is this: the single greatest determinant of how well a child will do in school is the education level of the parents. So with so many obvious negative consequences to dropping out of high school, why would anyone choose to do so? A common misconception is this: the high school dropout is someone who chose to develop a negative attitude about some aspect of the learning experience, and their bad attitude caused them to turn their backs on their education. However, some people who drop out of high school loved all aspects of the learning experience, but they were assigned to take classes in a school that became nothing less than dangerous. So they left school out of concern for their own physical well-being. And that is particularly true in those neighborhoods with a high crime rate. I'm keenly aware of some of the challenges faced by the young high school dropout and the adult without a high school diploma, not because I'm aware of a few statistics. I know from, as George Washington once said, dear bought experience. And I say that because when I was 14 years old, I made the conscious decision to quit school. Next year will be the 50th anniversary of me making that mistake, and I've often referred to it as the worst decision of my entire life. However, a few years after I came to the realization that I needed an education and that I wanted a career, I developed a means by which to recover called the Tools of Learning. It's a system of learning, understanding, and remembering information so that a person can succeed in both work and school. Now, when most people first hear of this Tools of Learning, they say, well, what makes it different? What makes it unique? And I've got several reasons why I believe it's unique, but foremost are the following two. Number one, most of the students I teach this information to are adults without a high school diploma returning to school. Some of them haven't been to school in decades, literally decades. Well, since the program was written by someone without an education, struggling to get an education, and finally figuring out how to get it done, the Tools of Learning is written at a level that most adult education students can readily understand. I estimate that most of it is written at or below the 9th grade level. But more important is this reason why it's different. The introduction and the beginning of each of the 20 tools has something in it called the preparation motivation. The preparation motivation is something I learned from an organization called the Connecticut State Fire School, now known as the Connecticut Academy. And what it says, simply stated, is in every lesson plan you should have a means by which to prepare or motivate the student to value the information you're going to teach them. That's the essence of it. Well, I learned about how important the preparation motivation is the hard way from the following experience. I was in the process of giving my very first presentation to a group of adult education students. Some of them were ordered to be in the classroom by their parole officers, and they looked at me like this, and with a look on their face that said, "Go ahead and teach us this, we dare you." So after I spoke for just about 3 minutes, one of them stood up quickly and pointed at me and said, "Who are you to teach us how to study?" And when he said that, I said, I obviously didn't prepare and motivate these people to value the information. And so on the spot, I decided that I would tell them the story of why the Tools of Learning was created in the first place, and it seemed to work. They listened to the rest of the presentation, they asked meaningful questions, and they even thanked me when the entire presentation was over. But that preparation motivation consists of the following. 3 years after I quit going to school. I was getting ready to turn 18 years old, and I knew I was going to need a full-time job, and I was eligible to apply for a job at Pratt & Whitney, a factory next to Hartford. And they paid big money, and they didn't require a high school diploma. But you had to have a good job reference. So I went to go see the most respected man I knew. His name was Walter James Doc Hurley Sr. He was my 5th grade gym teacher, and in the years to follow, he created a scholarship fund that sent over 500 high school graduates to college, among many other great things. But I went to see him for a job reference to get to Pratt & Whitney, and instead of getting a job reference, I got a lecture. And that lecture lasted for about 45 minutes, but the gist of it was persistence. He said, I quitted everything, got to be persistent. Be of service. Stop being so self-centered. Help someone else. And the last thing he talked about was getting an education. At one point he said, I'm not going to help you get a job at Pratt & Whitney or anywhere else because you're going back to school. I said, I can't go back to school. Mr. Hurley, I'll be an 18-year-old freshman. He said, you don't have to go back to high school. You can get a GED, and with that, you can go on to college. Now, he had to explain to me what a GED was, but when I left his house, I had the distinct feeling that I was going to be able to make something of my life in spite of all the mistakes I had made up until that point. So for the next 2 years, I worked at getting a GED. Had to take the test twice because I flunked it the first time. Then I went to college. I'm in college. Twice I went to college. Didn't get a single college credit because I failed all of the courses. Certain that I wasn't going to get a college education, I applied to the Hartford Fire Department. My brother, Rocky, Edgar Teale, came to my rescue. He said, there's an organization in the city of Hartford called Plan B Incorporated, run by a woman named Cynthia Jennings, and they'll prepare you to take the test to become a firefighter. So I took their course 4 times. After 4 times, I could have taught the course. I got into the Hartford Fire Department. But the first day of training was a real eye-opening experience. The deputy chief of training, a man by the name of Raymond McTeague, came before the class, and he said, I sincerely hope some of you left your previous jobs on good terms because you're going back. He then went on to say, you have to maintain at least a 70 average. If you go below a 70 average, you'll be dismissed from the program. At that time, I had a 4-year-old daughter, Kathleen, and a 2-year-old son, Charlie, and I said, I can't lose this job. I looked at the syllabus. There were long chemistry definitions that had to be learned, and medical terms, hydraulic formulas like gallons per minute equals 29.7 times the diameter squared times the square root of the nozzle pressure. I said, how am I going to learn this? They're speaking Chinese. It's not something I can understand at all. So during our first break, I went up to the first recruit I saw outside. This is a long time ago, obviously, but his name was Eddie Lopez. He's on the left, and that's me on the right. But I walked up to him and I said, how you planning on getting through this training program successfully? Maybe we should get some study groups together. He said, no, we don't need any study groups. He says, I was in the military, and they taught us how to remember information. He then went on to explain what his system consisted of: visualization, repetition to enhance retention, quite comprehensive. As a matter of fact, tool number 17 includes it. It's a portion of tool number 17 of the 20 tools. But when I finished talking with him, I said, for goodness sakes, there's a way to remember information. I wish I had known that years ago. But for the next 2 months, I worked at creating my own system of remembering information. And I knew that I had to readily learn it, and that understanding the information was a prerequisite to retention, or it worked better if I understood it before I tried to remember it. At the end of 2 months, I had 11 ways by which to learn, understand, and remember information, and that program took me to the top of my recruit class. Out of 33 recruits, I graduated number 1 with a 99.7 average. Thank you. Encouraged by my success, I signed up for more training even after I graduated from drill school. Got into the firehouse, and my captain, Lucien Teale, there he is. Lucien Teale came up to me and he said, Charles, I believe you're the kind of man that can become chief of this department, but I've been looking at your record. You're not going to make it with a GED. He says, you got to get a college education. And so I went about the process of getting a college education. Using the tools of learning, this time I made it. I got an associate degree from Capital Community College, a bachelor's degree from Springfield College, and a master's degree from the University of Hartford. And, thank you. I also used the tools of learning to pass all of my promotional exams on my way to becoming chief of the Hartford Fire Department. Over the course of the 32 years following that summer of 1982, the tools of learning went through 312 revisions. But each time it went through a revision, it revolved around one central idea, and that idea is this: you should never try to learn anything without knowing how to learn, how to understand, and how to remember that information first. What I'd like to do with the rest of my time is just share with you a sample of what the program consists of. It's 20 tools long, and I can only address just a portion of each of the tools that I'm going to address. But use of a dictionary. This recommends the 5x-S system of building a powerful vocabulary: sense, search, synonym, sentence, and story. The purpose of it is to enhance our ability to comprehend what we read, to write, to be able to engage in public speaking, and also to avoid those dreaded malapropisms, words that don't exist that we use periodically. Words like, conversate, not a word. Expressions like for all intensive purposes, not an expression. I know this from experience, but that's the beauty of this tool. Next, this is just 1/6 of the tool on establishing a solid math foundation, but it's deceptively important. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. It is amazing to me how many people go off to college without knowing their times tables. And if you don't know your times tables, you can't add or subtract fractions, you can't do most of algebra, and you can't do most of geometry, and all of that information is foundational doing trigonometry. What I'm telling you is you won't be able to do math in college, and they will not teach you your times tables in college. Once again, I know from experience. The PSG, or Personal Study Guide, simply stated, that's a sheet of paper, front and back. On the back of the paper, you put all the facts that you think are necessary for you to know and find difficult to remember. On the front of the paper, you create a question that forces you to answer questions regarding the information on the back. It's the best way that I can think of to test yourself before you're tested by someone else. And this thing works. I'm telling you from experience. A lot of experience in this. As a matter of fact, most of the program. Using knowledge to solve problems. Although the tools of learning has been used by, as a program, has been used by many individuals, adults, to get good grades, degrees, even promotions, it's not the ultimate goal of the program. The ultimate goal of the Tools of Learning program is to learn, understand, and remember information so that you can use that information to solve problems. Because as the dean of self-improvement, Earl Nightingale once said, if you're not in the problem-solving kind of business, you're unemployed. All right. And finally, just for this evening, and actually the last of the 20 tools, this is the grand finale. When I left my mentor's house, Walter Doc Hurley, he sent me to go see a counselor by the name of Bill Edmonds, who worked at what is now known as Capital Community College. And Bill Edmonds asked me during that meeting, that we had, if you want to call it a meeting, he said, do you know how many people spent their lives, risked their lives, and sometimes gave their lives so you could have the opportunity to succeed? And when he asked me that, I finally saw the correlation between the sacrifices of others and my actions, and I began to govern myself accordingly. It is my hope that everyone who hears the Tools of Learning program will do likewise. I'd like to conclude. If you know any adult without a high school diploma, please inform them that there are thousands of adult education programs throughout our nation designed to help them to graduate. And once they get that diploma in their hands, no one will ever be able to call them a high school dropout again. And if at any time they need help learning, understanding, and remembering information, please keep in mind the Tools of Learning. Well, that's all my time. Please keep in mind these 5 words. Never stop hitting the books.